Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your most complex stack of sources, from ancient philosophy to modern psychology, and really try to extract the essential intelligence you need.
And today, we are opening up something absolutely foundational to influence. It's a concept, really, that's as old as the ancient Greeks, but it's still right at the heart of modern leadership science.
We're diving deep into the ethos of leadership,
Yeah.
character, and credibility.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The foundational hook is Aristotle's central argument, right?
Yeah.
He had those three pillars: logos, the logic; pathos, the emotion; and ethos, the speaker's character and credibility.
That's right.
What makes ethos, the character piece, arguably the most potent?
Well, you can say it's the gatekeeper. Aristotle really understood something fundamental about, well, us, humans. Our brains seem to prioritize trust before we even start processing data.
Okay.
So if your audience doesn't trust you, if they pick up on any hint of duplicity or insincerity or just a basic flaw in your character,
Dismiss and shut down.
pretty much, they don't care how elegant your logic is, your facts and figures, meaningless. And they certainly won't be moved by your passion, your pathos. That lack of trust, it acts like a cognitive filter. It just dismisses the evidence right off the bat.
Right. So our mission today is really to figure out how we pass that credibility test. We're pulling together classical rhetoric, modern psychology, leadership philosophy, trying to give you a real guide here.
Yeah, we want to know, how is ethos actually built over time? What keeps it going? And crucially, what happens when it's lost? Sometimes, irrevocably.
The whole point being that who you are is maybe just as important, if not more so, than what you say.
Absolutely. And to map this out, we've got an incredible range of sources. We're looking at Plato's Critiques alongside, say, Cicero's ideas about political courage.
Yeah.
We're leaning heavily on Stephen Covey's character ethic. We'll analyze vulnerability through Brené Brown's work. And we'll look at some really powerful, sometimes quite devastating personal stories. Think Malcolm X, Elie Wiesel.
It really is a timeless lesson, isn't it? This idea of character-driven leadership.
It absolutely is.
All right, let's start way back with the Greeks. They seemed almost obsessed with setting these standards for credibility. In that classical view, ethos wasn't just a trick or a technique, was it?
No, not at all. It was intrinsically tied to your perceived moral character and, importantly, your practical wisdom,
Yeah.
your phronesis.
And Aristotle specifically linked ethos to, what was it, advisory speaking?
Yes, symbolistic, or deliberative speaking. That's the kind of rhetoric you use in the assembly, in public life, when you stand up and urge people towards a specific action or policy.
Based on what's best for the community's future.
Exactly. Based on what you argue is advantageous for everyone.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, if you're advising me on my life savings or, where the city should build a new hospital, I need to believe two things.
What's that?
One, that you're smart enough to actually know the right answer. And two, that you're morally sound enough to genuinely care about my best interest or the community's, not just your own.
Precisely. And you can see the lack of ethos immediately when you look at how reputation works. The sources point out that objections often work by showing the speaker hasn't made a true syllogism.
A syllogism. That's like the basic A plus B equals C logic.
Right. Like premise A, all citizens want security. Premise B, this law provides security. Conclusion C, therefore, all citizens support this law.
Okay.
But what if premise B is false? What if the law actually makes things less secure for most people, or maybe benefits only a select few? The refutation shows that the speaker assumed something false, or worse, maybe knew it was false.
So the argument just collapses. And when it collapses because the premise was dodgy,
Yeah.
the audience doesn't just reject the policy, they reject the speaker. It becomes a credibility crisis right there in the moment.
Because they realize they've been manipulated, not genuinely advised.
Exactly. You're watching trust evaporate in real time. Now, contrast that with the Roman view, championed by someone like Cicero. He really elevated eloquence, didn't just see it as persuasion, but linked it directly to political virtue. Right. Cicero thought true oratory demanded serious courage, especially when you're speaking against mob rule or even physical danger.
Yes, the ability to stand firm in chaos.
Yeah.
The classic example always cited is the trial of Milo. The situation was politically explosive, potentially violent.
Okay.
Cicero's point was, if you're going to advise the state, you need the guts, political and sometimes physical, to defend the truth, even when it's unpopular, even when it puts you at risk.
So if you're known as someone who backs down easily,
Then your advice, no matter how clever it sounds, just lacks weight. It doesn't have that foundation of real character behind it.
This link between character and courage is deep, but we have to address the counterargument, the big challenge to rhetoric itself. We need to bring in Plato and Socrates.
Yes. Socrates' view was pretty radical. He argued that the true politician, the true statesman, necessarily aims at the good of the citizens. Anything less isn't just bad politics.
It's a failure of knowledge.
Exactly. It shows you don't actually know what's truly good. Which leads us to his famous critique of oratory as just pandering. Kolikeia, he called it.
So rhetoric aimed only at pleasing the crowd, making them feel good.
Right. Without any real regard for what's genuinely better or worse for their souls or for the state. Just aiming for gratification.
And he specifically called out rhetoric aimed at a mixed popular audience. Children, women, men, slaves, free people. Why was that mix such a problem for him?
Well, think about it. Such a diverse crowd has incredibly varied, often conflicting desires. So the orator, if they just want applause of Kolikeia, they're almost forced to say whatever gratifies the most people in that moment.
Instead of the hard truth.
Instead of the difficult, perhaps singular truth that would actually benefit the city in the long run. Socrates saw this as basically abdicating moral responsibility for a bit of temporary, shallow approval.
He wasn't just being snobby about the audience then. He was saying that aiming for mere gratification corrupts the whole purpose of leadership, which should be guiding people toward the good.
Spot on. And this leads to that absolutely mind-bending Socratic power paradox.
Right, the idea that tyrants and, crooked politicians, they don't actually have real power. How does that work?
Well, they might have immense force, sure, armies, wealth, position, but Socrates argues they lack true power because they don't act from knowledge. They're mistaken about what's ultimately good for them. They think it's power, pleasure, wealth.
When, according to Socrates, what everyone really wants deep down is the ultimate good.
Precisely. So if a tyrant pushes a policy that harms people just to get richer, he's acting from ignorance of what's truly good for his own soul, and arguably even for his long-term power. Because he's acting from ignorance, he lacks true autonomy. He's a slave to his misguided desires, and therefore...
He lacks true power.
It's a devastating critique, isn't it? It sets the classical bar for ethos incredibly high. Credibility isn't just about sounding confident or having good technique. It's about operating from a moral core, so deeply rooted in understanding the good that your actions become, well, almost unimpeachable.
And if you fail that fundamental moral test, you might hold the office, you might have the title.
But you lack true influence. Your power is hollow.
Okay, that philosophical high-bar integrity, rooted in knowledge, actually resonates really strongly with some modern leadership thinking, doesn't it? Especially Stephen Covey's work.
Oh, absolutely. Covey drew a very sharp line between what he called primary greatness and secondary greatness. And it's basically an integrity test for leaders today.
So secondary greatness, that's the external stuff.
That's everything you see on the surface. Talent, charisma, communication skills, appearance, social status. What Covey termed the personality ethic. It's all the outward stuff.
And primary greatness.
That's the foundation. Fundamental character, goodness, integrity, living by correct principles, what he called the character ethic. And the problem is we often confuse the two.
Right. So what happens if a leader gets ahead based purely on that secondary, surface level stuff?
Covey's warning is pretty stark. If a leader's character is fundamentally flawed, there's duplicity, insincerity, a hidden agenda, then all their techniques.
Like communication training, influence tactics.
Exactly. All those polished skills will eventually, inevitably, be seen as manipulative. And that perception, it breeds deep, lasting distrust. You end up with maybe a brilliant technician, someone really skilled.
But nobody trusts their motives, so they're ultimately ineffective.
Right. It's like someone using a technique they learned from a book to pretend to be empathetic.
You can feel it, can't you, when it's not genuine?
You absolutely can. You see the gears turning. Technique without character just comes across as cynical. And this is why Covey brought up the law of the harvest.
The law of the harvest, like farming.
Kind of. His point was integrity can't be crammed. You can't just decide next Tuesday, okay, now I'm going to be trustworthy and expect it to stick or be believed.
You have to sow before you can reap.
Exactly. You have to cultivate character over time. If you try to shortcut it, using personality tricks to achieve success in relationships or leadership, well, life's challenges will eventually expose your true, flawed motives. And the result is failure, distrust.
So this leads us to the solution. Building a principle-centered core. What does that mean, practically?
It means shifting your source of security, guidance, wisdom, and power. If you center your life on things that constantly change your job, your money, your reputation, even other people like your spouse, you're going to be unstable. Covey called it roller coasting through life.
Up one day, down the next. No stability.
Right. But if you center your life on correct principles, things like fairness, integrity, honesty, human dignity, those things don't change. They're like natural laws, external and constant. That provides a solid, stable foundation.
That sounds, well, huge. How does someone actually develop that kind of inner integrity? It feels like a big ask.
It starts small, really small. It starts with making and keeping commitments to yourself, not just promises to others.
Like deciding to wake up early or finish a specific task?
Exactly. Every time you make a small commitment to yourself and you actually follow through, you build a little bit of inner integrity. You prove to yourself that you can trust yourself. Over time, this builds until, as Covey put it, your honor becomes greater than your moods.
So you're governed by your commitments, not just how you feel in the moment.
Precisely. Your internal compass becomes stronger than external pressures or internal whims.
We can actually see this kind of integrity demonstrated through action in the story of Russell H. Conwell. He became known in Pennsylvania as, like, its first citizen or the big brother.
Yes, his life was just a consistent, visible example of service. And not just grand gestures, but day-to-day actions.
Like what specifically?
Well, for instance, while managing a very busy career, he acted as the legal guardian for over 60 children. That's a massive commitment of time and care. And beyond that, he apparently dedicated hours each week for consultations with people who were too poor to pay him anything. He prioritized their well-being over his own potential earnings. These weren't one-offs. They were patterns of principle-centered care.
But the really telling story, the one that shows how deeply ingrained this was, is about the time he missed a lecture. He prided himself on never doing that.
Right. Just once. He didn't show up. And the reason, it speaks volumes.
What happened?
On his way to the lecture hall, he saw a runaway horse pulling a carriage with 2 women inside. He stopped the horse, saved the women, got injured himself, and ended up going to the hospital.
Okay, heroic, but what's the ethos connection?
The critical detail is that he apparently had a tendency to forget these kinds of acts. He didn't see it as some grand heroic deed to be trumpeted. He just reacted, dealt with the immediate need.
He wasn't performing for an audience. He wasn't thinking about the lecture he was missing or the applause he wouldn't get.
Exactly. He acted out of character, dealt with the consequences going to the hospital, and didn't even think to make excuses or highlight his own heroism later. That's the ultimate sign of primary greatness. The virtue was so ingrained it was almost unconscious.
His community just took his sincerities, as the source puts it, for granted because they were so consistent. The act was the point, not the credit.
That's a leader whose honor is truly greater than their moods or even their career demands. That's earned ethos.
So integrity and principle are the bedrock. But ethos also seems to require these softer skills too, like empathy and humility. Dale Carnegie had that great line.
A drop of honey catches more flies than a gallon of gall.
Yes. His point was, if you want to win someone over, convince them you're their sincere friend first. That's the way to their reason.
It's about bypassing defensiveness, isn't it? If you come at someone aggressively, their shields go up immediately. But if you lead with genuine goodwill, you kind of dissolve the potential for conflict.
There's a brilliant example of this in that labor relations case with Robert F. Black at the White Motor Company. Big strike, thousands of workers.
Yeah, 2,500 employees out on strike. Most executives back then, maybe even now, would respond with threats, legal action, condemnations.
But Black did something completely different.
Totally different. First, he publicly praised the strikers for how peaceful and orderly they were being. He appealed to their dignity right away.
Just words, though.
No, then came the action. He saw the picketers were just standing around, idle, probably bored and frustrated. So he went out and bought baseball bats and gloves, rented a bowling alley nearby.
What?
Yeah. And he told the union leaders, basically, have your men use these, keep busy as long as things stay peaceful. They're still part of the White Motor family.
Wow. That's an incredible gesture. What kind of signal does that send?
It completely reframed the whole situation. He showed he didn't see them just as adversaries, but as human beings who deserved respect, even recreation. He established himself as maybe not a friend, but certainly not a callous enemy.
That goodwill must have just dissolved the tension.
It allowed them to negotiate from a place of mutual dignity, not pure hostility. That drop of honey worked where a gallon of gall threats and anger would likely have just escalated everything.
And this links back to Covey again, right? On the importance of deep listening for building that kind of connection.
Absolutely. Covey points out that most of us, when we listen, we're not really listening to understand. We're listening with the intent to reply. We're formulating a rebuttal, looking for weaknesses in their argument.
Preparing our counterattack.
Exactly. But true connection, the kind that builds ethos, requires empathic listening. Listening with a genuine intent to understand the other person's perspective, their feelings, their reality.
And if you just use the technique of empathic listening, like reflecting back what they said, but without the genuine desire to understand.
People pick up on it. It feels manipulative. They feel exposed, like you're just using a tool on them. Trust is instantly destroyed. Real ethos requires the humility to actually put your own agenda aside for a moment and truly try to see the world through their eyes.
Okay, so from empathy and humility, let's talk about vulnerability. Brené Brown's work really brings this to the forefront as a leadership necessity, especially now.
Yes, she makes a powerful case that real innovation, creativity, growth, they are all inherently vulnerable activities. Why? Because they involve uncertainty, risk, emotional exposure. There are no guarantees.
And that's where organizations often get stuck.
Totally stuck. They often fall into what she calls the Viking or victim shield. It's this defensive posture where admitting mistakes, asking for help, saying, I don't know, that's seen as weakness. So people protect themselves.
Do you stick to what they know, what feels safe?
Right. They focus on perfecting what they already do well rather than putting them out there, risking failure with something new. That fear of shame, of being seen as incompetent, stifles innovation.
So how does a leader break that cycle? How do you build a culture where it's okay to be vulnerable, to take risks?
They have to model it themselves. Relentlessly. Brown is really clear on this. Leaders have to show up, try new things, be willing to stumble, make mistakes, maybe even fail publicly.
And crucially, not beat themselves up about it or start blaming others.
Exactly. They have to model shame resilience. You can't expect your team or even your kids to be more resilient to shame, more willing to try and fail than you are yourself. They watch how you handle setbacks.
That need to embrace adversity, to be resilient through failure, that connects right back to the Stoics, doesn't it? Like Seneca, and even figures who endured extreme hardship like Viktor Frankl.
Absolutely. The core Stoic idea is that our internal power, our will, our ability to choose our response, that's the one thing the outside world cannot touch. It's our final trump card, as Ryan Holiday puts it.
So external events can hurt our bodies, our reputations, our finances.
But our character, our inner self, cannot be harmed unless we consent, unless we choose a response that degrades us.
And true will, in this view, isn't about aggression, like, I will force this outcome.
No, it's quieter than that. It's about humility, resilience, the internal strength to endure and maintain your principles, to choose a constructive response even when things are terrible. As Covey says, these difficult experiences become the crucibles that forge our character.
There's that incredibly powerful example from Elie Wiesel after the liberation of Buchenwald.
Just staggering. Here are these survivors, barely alive, starved, traumatized beyond imagination, and one of their first collective acts.
Not revenge, not lashing out.
No, they chose to hold a religious service, to pray, to engage with their faith, even towards a God who, from their perspective, must have seemed utterly absent or indifferent.
Choosing connection and meaning over despair or rage.
It's a profound demonstration of that internal capacity to choose one's response, even when external agency, external power has been stripped down to almost nothing. Their character endured because they made a conscious, resilient choice about how to respond to their suffering. That's internal power. That's ethos forged in fire.
Now, we need to be really clear about the difference between this kind of earned ethos built on character and the sort of authority that just comes with, say, a job title or rank.
That's a crucial distinction. Simon Sinek really hammers this home with his golden circle idea. To truly inspire, to build real loyalty and trust, you have to start with WHY.
The purpose, the cause, the belief behind what you do.
Exactly. Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? If the leader doesn't know their why, or if their why is just, to make money or to get promoted,
then nobody else is going to buy in with real conviction.
Right. Credibility that's linked to a genuine, often service-oriented purpose creates influence. And influence, Sinek argues, is far more powerful and sustainable than just relying on rank or formal authority. That kind of commitment goes way beyond just surface popularity.
And if you only rely on your rank, that authority is pretty fragile. There's another great story about Russell H. Conwell, the Civil War officer we mentioned earlier, that illustrates this perfectly. It critiques that tendency to glorify rank.
Ah, yes, the orator story. So, someone is giving this stirring tribute, to Conwell's wartime service.
And paints this picture of him charging ahead of his men, sword flashing, yelling, "Come on!" The classic Hollywood hero image.
The perfect romantic image of leadership in battle. Very dramatic, very
Yeah.
secondary greatness maybe.
But Conwell himself, reflecting on it later, pointed out the military reality. For an infantry officer in that situation, charging ahead of your men
Is next to a crime, he said. A serious tactical error.
fire crime.
Because the officer's actual responsible place, according to the rules of war and effective command, is usually behind the main line.
So they can see the whole picture, direct the troops effectively.
Precisely. See the flow of battle, manage reserves, issue orders based on the situation, not just personal bravery. The orator had focused on the symbol of rank, the shining sword, the heroic charge, rather than the actual duty of leadership, which was about effectiveness and the welfare of the soldiers.
Valorizing the appearance over the substance.
Exactly. Glorifying position over responsible action.
Let's contrast that with a leader like Theodore Roosevelt and his idea of the square deal. That seems like character-driven leadership in action.
Definitely. Roosevelt's call for justice wasn't just about, let's play fair under the current rules. He argued for actively changing the rules.
Changing the system itself.
Yes, to create more genuine equality of opportunity and a fairer reward for actual hard work and good service. It showed a deep commitment to the public good, even if it meant challenging powerful interests and upsetting the status quo. That's ethos demonstrated through a principled stand for structural reform.
And crucially, for this ethos to land, the delivery matters too, right? Quintilian, the Roman rhetoric expert, had warnings about this.
He did. He stressed that the orator has to maintain a natural demeanor. If you use too much flowery language, too many obvious rhetorical tricks, too much ornamentation.
It starts to feel fake, contrived.
Right. It seems incongruous, mean, or excites contempt, as the source puts it. When the artifice, the technique, is too obvious when the art is unveiled, the audience starts questioning your sincerity.
So even with a strong why and real character, you need to communicate it in a way that feels authentic.
Exactly. True credibility often lies in that feeling of naturalness, where the audience focuses on your message and your perceived integrity, not on how cleverly you're constructing your sentences.
Okay, so we've seen how ethos is built through character, integrity, empathy, resilience. But it's fragile. It can take a lifetime to build and potentially moments to destroy. The cost of duplicity is enormous.
Devastatingly so. We see this with stark clarity in the personal story of Malcolm X.
His relationship with Elijah Muhammad?
Yes. Malcolm X had completely devoted himself, elevated Muhammad as this beacon of morality, this reformer. He built his identity and a powerful organization around that belief in Muhammad's integrity.
And then he found out about the hypocrisy.
Yes, he learned about Muhammad's profound immorality, particularly the stark contradictions between the strict morality being preached publicly and Muhammad's own secret actions. The discovery just tormented him.
The psychological toll must have been immense. Dedicating your life to someone, promoting their message.
And then finding out the foundation is rotten. It led to this deep internal crisis. He talks about the horror of feeling like a dupe, like a total fool, for preaching this message of moral purity while knowing the leader himself was deeply compromised.
And it wasn't just personal betrayal, was it? It was political, too.
Right. He learned Muhammad was praising him publicly, but privately undermining him, calling him dangerous. That double dealing, that duplicity.
It shattered everything for him. Not just his personal faith, but the entire moral claim of the Nation of Islam organization, as he saw it.
Exactly. It shows how a fundamental character flaw in a leader doesn't just affect them. It poisons the entire structure built around them. The allegiance, the trust, it all becomes meaningless once that core integrity is gone.
Which brings us back to Covey's point about agreements. Formal contracts, performance reviews.
They're essentially worthless without the underlying character and relationship base to sustain them in spirit. If there's no trust, no shared honesty, the agreement just becomes a piece of paper, something for lawyers to fight over. It doesn't guide behavior constructively.
We see this fragility play out in the justice system, too. Bryan Stevenson's fight to free Walter McMillian is a powerful example.
Stevenson understood something crucial. Even if he could get McMillian released on some technicality, some tricky legal loophole,
the community's distrust and hostility might remain. It wouldn't feel like real justice, and it could even endanger McMillian when he returned home.
Right. To truly restore faith, to rebuild the community's collective ethos in that situation, people needed more than a legal win. They needed to understand the simple, powerful truth of McMillion's innocence.
Justice based on character and truth, not just manipulating the rules.
Exactly. When trust is broken that deeply, especially by institutions meant to uphold it, only transparency and consistent truth can begin to mend it.
Which underlines the need for absolute consistency. Les Brown tells that simple but really potent story about his mother.
Yeah, she married a man when she was just 15, but left him only months later. Why? Because he told her a big lie.
Just one lie.
Apparently. But it was significant enough, related to a promise about her ailing father. Her reaction was immediate and absolute. She said, "He told me a big lie, and after that I could not stand him anymore." Boom. Done.
Credibility instantly demolished.
Because the action betrayed a fundamental commitment. It wasn't necessarily the scale of the lie, but the perceived betrayal of character. That inconsistency was intolerable.
Yet, sometimes influence requires navigating tricky situations carefully, doesn't it? Without resorting to lies, but maybe being strategic, like Sojourner Truth.
That's a fascinating example of strategic ethos. She traveled, selling her life story, her narrative, and singing songs. Many of her songs were powerful anti-slavery messages.
But she often labeled them religious.
Yes. Was that deception? Not really. It seems more like a pragmatic tactical choice. By calling them religious songs, she could gain entry and perform them in both abolitionist meetings and religious gatherings.
Expanding her reach and influence.
Exactly. It allowed her to deliver her core message, which was deeply rooted in her lived experience and moral conviction, to a much wider audience. Her fundamental character, her dignity, her calm resilience in the face of hostility, that was her bedrock ethos. The labeling was a strategic way to navigate the political and social spaces she operated in.
So she maintained her overall credibility and effectiveness without actual duplicity. She understood the landscape.
Right. It showed a profound insight into how to make her voice heard, how to ensure people listened because they respected her actions, her resilience, her truth, far more than any title or label.
Okay, so we've traced ethos all the way from Aristotle's foundational idea, the speaker's character being paramount, right through to its practical necessity in modern leadership.
And the consistent thread seems to be that the character ethic really is the foundation. All the techniques, the skills, the charisma, that's secondary. Real, sustainable influence, true power, it seems, is earned.
Earned through demonstrated integrity, through empathy, through consistency. And often it's forged in those tough moments, moments of vulnerability, of trial, of standing by principles.
Absolutely. Which brings us back, I think, to that core Stoic principle that kind of underpins this whole discussion.
Our will, our internal power, the choice we have and how we respond.
Right. We choose our response to any stimulus. We are, as Covey put it, the programmer of our own lives. External events can wound us, challenge us, but they cannot fundamentally hurt our character.
Unless we allow them to. Unless we consent to a response that diminishes us.
And the ultimate measure of a leader driven by character, as Seneca saw it, often isn't just in their victories or successes. He praised Scipio Africanus, the great Roman general.
Not just for winning wars.
Not primarily, but for his moderation, his sense of duty, his willingness to choose exile later in life rather than letting political infighting potentially damage the Roman Republic.
Yeah.
He put principle above personal position.
That's primary greatness in action. Inner virtue over external reward. So remember, your audience, whether it's your family, your team, your community, the wider public, they are always watching. They're not just hearing your words.
No, they're constantly weighing your actions against your claims, your character against your charisma. They're assessing your ethos.
And remember that foundational idea. No one can truly harm your character without your consent.
So the challenge we want to leave you with, the learner, is this. The next time you face a tough choice, an obstacle, maybe a mistake you've made, ask yourself, what difficult decision can I make today? Not necessarily the one that leads to the easiest win or the most applause.
But the one that aligns with principle. The one that proves unequivocally through action who you are.